It's hard to believe, but after 5 years being on the market still, the cheapest camera on the market, full frame camera on the market right now is Canon RP. And you may be asking, like, it's still on sale, and if it's really worth buying in 2024, 2025, if it still performs good. So first, let's start with the basics. This camera does have sensor that was first found in older camera, in not mirrorless, but DSLR camera. It was 6D Mark II. And this was actually a very successful camera, and this is still a quite good sensor, though it does have its limitations. So now today we will try to answer if this camera holds up in 2024, or there are another or different models of cameras that you should invest instead of buying Canon RP. This camera features 26.2 megapixel sensor, which for full frame camera is a good megapixel count. In other words, I don't actually like too much those high resolution sensors, because in most cases you don't need that much megapixels. So the less the megapixels, the better dynamic range it is in most cases. In other words, like, this is a good balance. However, the dynamic range of Canon RP is not that great, and usually Sony does have better dynamic range. So this is something to keep in mind when you want to choose your, like, entry-level full-frame camera. But in other categories, this camera really performs very well up to today, and it can be easily used as a professional camera. And that's crazy, because nowadays you can buy it for around $800. Sometimes you find it like on some sales, and you can even buy it under $800, which is an amazing value for what this camera is. Image quality out of this camera is very nice, because there are these specific Canon colors that a lot of people like, and you can see for yourself that those colors are very nice, very vibrant. So if you want to have good images out of the camera, underexpose a little bit, and this camera will perform. In low light, it does generate quite a lot of noise, unfortunately. So if you want to shoot weddings with this camera, it's not a deal breaker, but you don't want to go with ISO too high. Anything above 3200 ISO to me is not a great choice. So what you want to do, you want to invest in a very bright lens. So this would be something you really need to invest if you want to use Canon RP. The downside of this solution is that you cut the cost on the camera body, but you have to spend a little more on the lens. So for example, on Sony E-mount, you have so many alternatives to buy. On Fujifilm, you have so many alternatives, you just don't have the full frame camera, but you have so many alternatives to buy cheaper lenses. While in case of Canon, you pretty much are stuck with Canon lenses, or there is some small selection of Sigma lenses. So that's not ideal, because Canon lenses tend to be a little expensive, so this is something you have to take into consideration when thinking of Canon RP, if I can afford the lens that I actually need. But there's a great value lens like 24-105 lens that comes a lot of times as a kit lens with this camera, and this is a nice and sharp lens. Now let's talk about autofocus. So autofocus nowadays, for nowadays standards, is still good, still holds up. It can lose your eye or your face after a while, but at the beginning specifically of a series of a photo shoot, it performs very well. So if you hold the button, after a time it may start to wander a little bit. An A7 Mark III, for example, that is 1 year older, actually performs better, but still nothing to be afraid of. This autofocus is actually usable. The last thing I want to mention here, if it's still worth buying in 2024, is video performance. So it is capable of recording 4K at 30 frames per second. It does not have built-in image stabilization. You are only stuck with digital image stabilization. So there is a simple rule to get the most out of this camera in 2024 and beyond, which is record in 4K 30 frames per second, highest image quality you can get, but never use electronic image stabilization. It just sucks. It is bad. It will destroy your footage, so just forget about that. If you want image stabilization, you either have to buy image stabilized lens, which is much better solution, or you just invest in gimbal. One of my favorite gimbals comes from ZHIYUN, and you can see it on a B-roll. It is a very, very cool gimbal to stabilize camera. So this camera by itself is light and small. The image stabilizer, the gimbal, is light and small, so you get get a pretty decent video making tool. Would I pick Canon RP in 2024? Absolutely. If you want Canon ecosystem, this camera performs very well, and it's surprising because it's one of the oldest and cheapest cameras, full frame cameras on the market that are available right now. However, if you can spend a little bit more, I would recommend to get A7 Mark III, which is better for autofocus performance and does offer better video quality and has got an in-body image stabilization, which is a great feature for video makers and hybrid shooters. And this camera, despite being 1 year older, performs a little better in terms of dynamic range, and it does have lower noise when it comes to higher ISO values. But still, Canon RP is the cheapest full-frame camera on the market. It still offers an amazing value. So if you are prepared to spend a little bit more on the lenses, because Canon ecosystem tends to be a little bit more expensive when you invest, when you build it up, then this is still a good choice. I hope you guys liked it. Thumbs up if yes. I hope you enjoyed this review of the camera, and I see you guys in the next recording.